we are following this hour, today is the one-year mark since President Park Geun-hye won the presidential election. We break down her first 10 months in the nation's top office and her performance on issues including politics, the economy, and foreign affairs. The suspense is over. The U.S. Federal Reserve decides to start tapering in January at the heels of economic recovery, ending a massive 5-year intervention in financial markets. Plus, the two Koreas meet for the first time since September to discuss the joint Kaesong industrial complex, while a delegation of foreign officials crossed the border for a tour of the factory zone. Well, these stories and more next on Primetime News. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Thursday, December 19th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin this evening in North Korea, where a meeting was held between the two Koreas over modernizing and globalizing the Inter-Korean Joint Industrial Complex in Kaesong. Also
Thursday, a foreign delegation crossed the border for a tour around the factory park. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
The two Koreas met on Thursday for the first time since the North executed its second-in-command and key economic policymaker Jang Sung-taek last week. It's the fourth round of inter-Korean discussions on the management of their jointly run Kaesong industrial complex. On the agenda was easing the commute and custom procedures for South Korean workers crossing the border to the north, as well as allowing the use of the internet and mobile phones within the complex. Another key issue was attracting foreign investors. On the same day, North Korea welcomed a delegation of foreign officials from the Group of 20 nations to the joint business park. The South Korean government expects the tour to be the first step in globalizing the complex, which is regarded as the last remaining symbol of economic cooperation between the two Koreas. Experts say Thursday's inter-Korean talks and visit by the G20 delegation will offer a glimpse at North Korea's economic policy and where the joint factory zone stands after Jang's execution. As the country's key economic policymaker, Jang had been in charge of a handful of economic cooperation projects. Meanwhile, former NBA star Dennis Rodman left for Pyongyang for the third time this year. Experts say if Rodman meets with his North Korean friend Kim Jong-un again, it will signal the regime remains stable, at least for now. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
And back here in the nation, the railway strike entered its 11th day on this Thursday, capped off by a second massive street protest in downtown Seoul.
The government maintains that the strike is illegal, and the state-owned rail operator is insisting all striking workers return to their posts. But the demands continue to fall on deaf ears. Our Ji Myung-gil has more.
At least 10,000 angry unionized workers from the state-run Korea Railroad Corporation made speeches and chanted slogans as they gathered in front of Seoul Plaza near City Hall on Thursday. Hundreds of police formed barricades around the plaza to prepare for any possible clashes, and thousands of ordinary citizens showed up in support of the rail workers. On day 11 of the longest railway strike in Korea's history, rail workers from all over the nation gathered to protest the government's move to establish a new rail operator, which they claim as being a first step toward privatization.
The government is not providing any answers to our requests not to privatize Korail. Instead, they are just cracking down on our massive rallies, saying they are illegal. We are out here again to protest against President Park Geun-hye. We're asking her to stick to her pledges.
The massive strike comes as police raided 4 regional headquarters of Korea's Railway Workers Union on Thursday with court-issued warrants. The police also said they arrested one of the 25 strike leaders on Thursday, for whom the court had issued arrest warrants. The state-owned Korail gave an ultimatum to return to work by Thursday, and so far at least 950 workers have returned. The strike has crippled railway services nationwide, hitting cargo train services the hardest. Freight rail operations are running at 39% their normal levels, and long-distance core rail services at 56% and 61% respectively.
Despite the union's request to delay the issuance of a license for the new rail service, the government decided to go ahead with a plan as scheduled on Friday. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
The South Korean Defense Ministry has announced the interim results of its investigation into allegations that the military intervened in last year's presidential election.
It turns out the military did post a massive number of political comments online, but was not aiming to influence the election. Han Da-eun explains.
After a 2-month investigation into the military's Cyber Warfare Command, the Defense Ministry announced Thursday that the unit posted some 15,000 political comments online. About 2,000 of the comments named specific political parties or politicians. The military explained, however, that the comments targeted North Korea and others seen as a threat to national security and were part of a larger strategy that was not aimed at influencing last year's presidential election. The head of the ministry's Central Investigation Command, Baek Nak-jong, said the comments were posted under the direction of the Cyber Command Chief, who ordered unit members to post strong comments online, including political claims on significant national security issues. Those include North Korea's sinking of the South Korean warship Cheonan and allegations that late President Roh Moo-hyun conceded the northern limit line during his 2007 summit with then North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. Officials added the unit was not related to the National Intelligence Service in any way. The Cyber Command Chief has been stripped of his post, while 10 members of the unit have been indicted for posting more political comments than others. Immediately following the announcement, Democratic Party members of the Parliament's National Defense Committee released a statement saying the results of the probe are unacceptable and demanded an independent investigation into the case. The party claims that it was a target of the Cyber Command Unit's smear campaign and that it hurt their candidates' chances in last year's election. Pundits say the military has left room for controversy as questions remain about how the political comments they posted differ from an organized smear campaign. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
And finally, an issue that lawmakers of all political stripes at the National Assembly can agree upon.
The parliament passed a resolution that calls on Japan to stop its move towards collective self-defense. Our Kim Yeon-ji reports.
In an all-member assembly session Thursday, lawmakers approved a resolution demanding Japan stop its push for collective self-defense, which would allow Tokyo to use force in the event an ally is attacked. The resolution says Tokyo's push for collective self-defense runs counter to its constitution that was adopted after World War II, which renounces war as a sovereign right and the use of force as a means of settling international disputes. It urges Japan to move away from efforts to deny or glorify its imperialistic past, and demands that Tokyo accept legal responsibility for the Korean victims of sexual slavery during World War II, and offer them due compensation. The resolution also calls on Japan to stop making false claims to the Korea-controlled Dokdo Islets. In the resolution, Korean lawmakers also demanded that the U.S. work with Japan to dispel Korea's worries, saying that Japan's denial of history and shift from years of pacifism disrupts the post-war international order. Washington has given Tokyo full support for its pursuit of collective self-defense, saying that Japan's endeavor can contribute to peace in Northeast Asia. However, tensions have ratcheted up in the region, following China's declaration of an air defense zone over the East China Sea late last month. On Tuesday, Japan's cabinet approved a new defense package that significantly boosts its military spending over the next 5 years, citing China's growing power in the region as a reason. Kim Yeon-ji, Arirang News.
A year ago today, then presidential candidate Park Geun-hye was elected as the 18th president of Korea. She won more than half of the votes with her key pledges of national integration, economic revitalization, and welfare expansion.
Today, we take a look back at what President Park has done since her Election Day victory. Our presidential office correspondent Jinju joins us now to tell us more. So, Jinju, let's start with the opinion polls.
Yes. What does the public think about President Park's performance over the past 10 months since her inauguration in late February? A Gallup Korea survey conducted last week shows that more than half of the people thought that President Park had done a good job, while 35% were less supportive. Now, what made them think this way? People who gave high grades to President Park thought that she did especially well with regard to diplomatic issues. Those who believe the president didn't do as good a job say the president isn't communicating enough with the public or opposition parties and that she hasn't kept her campaign pledges.
It seems that President Park had high marks for her handling of diplomatic and inter-Korean issues. Can you elaborate?
Yes, President Park was firm with her principle in dealing with North Korea. Experts say this is why South Korea wasn't swayed by Pyongyang's provocative acts and was successful in keeping tensions from escalating any further than they did.
Principle can make North Korea behave the way we want North Korea behave. And by principled approach, we can, possibly tame North Korea. We don't want to have a game with North Korea when North Korea is not sincere.
President Park was also very active on the diplomatic front. She's held a total of 30 bilateral summits and made 5 overseas trips to the U.S., China, Russia, Southeast Asia, and Europe, winning support for her North Korea policy and pushing ahead with her so-called sales diplomacy. But major tasks do remain. Many analysts say although President Park was able to bolster bilateral relations with China, she has more work to do in strengthening the country's relationship with the U.S. Professor Kim Hyun-wook of Korea National Diplomatic Academy says Korea-U.S. ties are receding.
We have a lot of homework to do about our relationship with the United States. We have to develop our comprehensive strategic alliance. We have to think about what to do about that alliance. We announced that alliance in 2009, and after that, there has been nothing to undergird the alliance, to fill up the contents of the alliance. So I think...
So, Jinju, let's talk now about some of the criticisms that President Park has received about how she has handled domestic affairs.
As you said, poor grades were given for her handling of domestic issues. In particular, pundits point out that she lacked the skills and effort to communicate with the public and, of course, the opposition party, especially with the ongoing political impasse of the National Assembly.
Her grade is disappointing, especially because she started out with very high hopes. We look around and labor stripes and the politicians get bickering each other as hard as ever. So those kind of things, people point to the president who's in charge. So in that sense, I think the expectation management is one of the key issues. But then her communication style has not helped either.
But the president did receive praise for her reform measures that aim to, quote, normalize the abnormal. They seek to root out corruption and wrong practices in the government and society.
Jinju, President Park has dedicated a lot of her attention to economy and improving the people's livelihoods. What's the perception of her performance there?
Well, Chia, President Park's key goals were economic revitalization and job creation, with her push for a creative economy highlighted the most throughout the year. Economic indicators in Korea have actually been showing signs of recovery, but people say their lives haven't improved all that much.
The government submitted more than 100 bills to National Assembly, but still among more than 100 bills, only a couple of bills only have been approved, passed in the National Assembly. Therefore, I think the government now, from now on, in particular for the new year, must try much more for the passage of the bill already submitted to the National Assembly.
There is also criticism that she has fallen short on her campaign pledge for welfare expansion. The biggest example is the government's scaled-back basic pension program announced in September. However, a senior presidential secretary says that it is too early to say she didn't keep her campaign promises, as the first 10 months have been a period to set up the basic structure and framework of the Park administration.
Indeed, that is. Well, thank you so much, Shinju, for that report.
My pleasure.
Meanwhile, over in the United States, a long-anticipated policy shift has been announced.
The Fed is set to wind down its aggressive bond buying program starting January on stronger economic conditions in the country. Our Park Ji-won has this report.
The Federal Reserve announced Wednesday that it will reduce its long-running bond purchasing program to $75 billion a month from previous $85 billion beginning next month. Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke said the central bank's decision came as the U.S. economy shows strong signs of recovery.
Despite significant fiscal headwinds, the economy has been expanding at a moderate pace, and we expect that growth will pick up somewhat in coming quarters, helped by highly accommodative monetary policy and waning fiscal drag. The job market has continued to improve, with the unemployment rate having declined further.
He added the Fed will further taper the stimulus bond buying program next year if the economy continues to pick up. To minimize any possible blow on financial markets, the Fed kept its record low key interest rate near zero. This suggests the rate will stay near the bottom line longer than previously expected.
The committee also clarified its guidance on interest rates, emphasizing that the current near-zero range for the federal funds rate target likely will remain appropriate well past the time that the unemployment rate declines below 6.5%, especially if projected inflation continues to run below the committee's 2% longer-run goal.
The announcement comes a little over a month before Bernanke steps down from his post as Fed chairman. Bernanke said he closely consulted with the Fed's Vice Chair Janet Yellen, who's expected to be the next Fed chair, and she fully supported the decision. With the Fed's decisions on the stimulus and interest rates, both the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 finished at record highs Wednesday. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Amid concerns over possible negative impact the Fed's decision could have on the Korean economy, Seoul's Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok gave assurances that it will have a limited effect given the country's stable fundamentals.
Speaking in a meeting of economy-related ministers on Thursday, Hyun also said that the markets have already adjusted to the prospect of the stimulus rollback, removing most of the remaining uncertainty surrounding the decision. He did warn, however, that international capital outflows could increase the level of market volatility in the short run and vowed to respond with a contingency plan to counter any market instability.
And for an expert's take on the Fed's decision, we connect live to Dr. He In, professor of economics at Jeonnam National University, on the phone. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Professor, so what is the impact of a reduction of $10 billion a month to the U.S. bond buying program?
Generally, the monetary tightening policy would be, reduce the economic performance of the United States. According to today's market reactions, probably many people expected more than $10 billion. So they think they are a little bit relieved about this announcement of the $10 billion of reduction.
Right. Professor, is it likely we'll see another reduction the following month?
It all depends. According to the Fed forward guidance, they said that their near zero interest rate policy will be continuous and is for a considerably longer time than the previously announced. And Fed already took the baby step towards the reducing the quantitative easing, and it will continue to reduce the amount of the quantitative easing further. But they will monitor the reaction of the financial market and the labor market before taking any other steps. So it all depends on the U.S. economic performance, especially about the employment and the consumptions.
Well, the finance minister and many experts here say that we'll feel a limited impact in Korea, but who will feel it?
I think it's a most negative impact will be focused on the financial market, since in theory, if monetary tightening policy, which may include the quantitative easing tapering, if the monetary tightening policy of the U.S. will be raise the value of the U.S. dollars, and it will increase the U.S. import. And if you look at the other counterparts, such as Korea, developing countries, export will be increasing according to this market reaction. But Fed already had been using the quantitative easing policy to boost their economy. So if the tapering of the quantitative easing contracts the U.S. economy further, then this rosy outlook will not be realized. But anyhow, I mean, according to the theory, the real economy's output, if you focus on the output, the Korea GDP will not be, it will not be negatively impacted by this end of the quantitative easing. But if you look at the financial market, we expect the foreign capital outflows by this quantitative easing. So if in Korean capital market, we have a very large share of the foreign investment. So if they stop buying Korean stock or Korean bond, it will increase the interest rate, and it will negatively affect the Korean stock prices.
I understand that the Korean government has also prepared for this moment. What policies will we see implemented as time goes by?
Yeah, as you mentioned already, the Ministry of Strategy and Finance mentioned about monitoring the effect of the quantitative easing tapering. And most serious problem that we can imagine is that a currency crisis like a status, due to the quantitative easing tapering. Since the quantitative easing tapering could reduce the foreigners' investment in Korean capital market, and if they leave Korea, then it can create the dollar liquidity crunch like back in 2008 global financial crisis. So it might be too early to tell, but we didn't see the problem yet in the stock market. Anyway, the government should prepare to supply the dollar liquidity in case of the dollar liquidity crunch in Korean capital market.
All right, Professor Huh, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
Sunderland advanced to the English Cup semifinals thanks to a miracle goal by midfielder Ki Sung-young on Wednesday.
And now they're set to face a powerhouse in English football. Stephen Che is here to tell us more. Stephen.
Hey guys, Ki's first goal for Sunderland came at the most opportune moment in their overtime victory against Chelsea in the Capital One Cup quarterfinals. Now they'll face Manchester United in the semis. The Reds have struggled in the Premier League throughout the season, but have had success in their League Cup and Champions League campaigns. Now Sunderland, which stands last in the league, have breezed through the cup, but they now take on one of their strongest opponents yet. Now, the first leg takes place on January 7th at the Stadium of Light. Now, Major League Baseball news. New reports say that Chu Shin-soo turned down a massive 7-year, $140 million offer from the New York Yankees. Apparently, the Yanks made the proposal to the choo-choo train after signing Jacoby Ellsbury to a deal worth $153 million for 7 years earlier this month. Chu and super agent Scott Boras rejected the offer, deciding instead to keep gambling in the open market. Now, whether that will pay off remains to be seen. Now let's get to Thursday's top matchup in the V-League. The LIG Graders met with the Korean Air Jumbos in Gumi. Now both teams came in having lost 4 in a row, but tonight one would go home with a win. Now action starts hot and it's the Graders that come out ahead. They wrestle away the first 2 sets, but the Jumbos, they take the 3rd set. But it's the Graders' Thomas Edgar who picks up the attack, and LIG takes the victory 3-1. Now that does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Choi. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
We saw snow flurries from time to time today here in Seoul, but that was nothing compared to some regions.
For details, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, what's the latest?
Good evening, guys. The Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces in particular got a lot of snow today. Taking a look at the current conditions, the nation is at the edge of a high-pressure system from China, which is why we're seeing cloudy skies across the map. Now, with a heavy snowfall watch in effect in some regions, there looks to be another round of snow overnight throughout the country. The mountains of Jeju should get at most 30 centimeters of snow, and the central regions 1 to 5 centimeters. Taking a look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul reaches 0 degrees. Meanwhile, Daegu and Gwangju should get snow overnight before reaching a high of 5 and 3 degrees respectively. Moving on to other regions, Jeju and Dokdo peak at 7 and 6 degrees respectively. Meanwhile, Mount Kumgang tops out at -4. While with all the snow and cold winds, make sure to dress warmly and please be careful behind the wheel. That's all for now, and back to you guys.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that's a broadcast on this Thursday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hae in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.